Why are we insisting on the word happiness? Because we're thinking long-term here. We're thinking about a revolution in the way people think about the good life. A revolution in terms of the way people think and pursue life's ultimate currency: happiness. Happiness studies as a field focuses on much more than positive psychology. In fact, it focuses on much more than psychology. It looks at what philosophers had to say about the good life, and it looks at theology and neuroscience and history and economics and film and literature. What we decided to do at the Happiness Studies Academy is salvage happiness. In other words, help people understand the true, the deep, the real meaning of a happy life. Precisely to talk about the fact that a happy life is about pleasure, and it's also about a sense of meaning and purpose in life. And it's about relationships and generosity and giving. And it's about intellectual well-being. It's about learning. And if we, through education, teach people that happiness is about pleasure, and happiness is about meaning, and it's about relationships, and it's about physical health, and it's about intellectual development. When people truly understand that all these elements make up the concept of happiness, then they will be more likely to pursue that, more likely to attain it, more likely to help others attain it, more likely to create a better world.
Hello, everyone, and welcome from wherever you are and whenever you are. Good afternoon, good evening, good middle of the night, I see. I'd like to welcome you to a very special get-together today with someone you know quite well, at least those of you who are members of the Happiness Studies Academy community. But before I introduce our guest, esteemed guest, Dan Buettner, just a few words about what we're going to do today. So Dan Buettner and I are going to chat for about 30 minutes, and then I will invite you for questions. And as you can see, some people have already got their hands up in advance. If you want to ask Dan questions, then please put your hands up and we will call on you. And important to keep your questions very brief, because we hope to get through as many questions as possible, as I'm sure there'll be many. So why is today so special? As you know, those of you who are members of the Happiness Studies Academy community, we study the theory of happiness. We talk a lot about research, but our focus is first and foremost on application, on making a difference in the world, whether it's in your coaching relationship, whether it's in your home, whether it's in your classroom, whether it's in your organization or team, or in your town and city, in your communities. And I must say, I'd be very hard pressed to think of anyone who makes more of a difference on a macro level when it comes to all of the things that we're talking about, contributing to happiness, contributing to health of individuals, of communities, than our guest, Dan Buettner. So he's a National Geographic Explorer and multiple New York Times bestselling author. He discovered the 5 places in the world, dubbed the Blue Zones, where people live the longest, healthiest lives. Buettner founded Blue Zones LLC, which is a company that works in partnership with city governments, hospital systems, and insurance companies to implement insights he gleaned in Blue Zones to help make cities healthier. Here's just one example of what he did. In Fort Worth, Texas, obesity rates dropped by 3%, and the city reported $250 million in projected healthcare cost savings. To date, over 70 cities have adopted Blue Zones projects, improving the health of more than 10 million Americans to date. Dan's new book, coming out September 2nd, is The Blue Zone's Kitchen One Pot Meals. This is a book that I'm very much looking forward to. You know, we talk a lot in our community about strengths. One of my strengths is not cooking, as some of you know. However, maybe this is just the book I have been waiting for, or should I say my family and friends have been waiting for. Dan, welcome. So great to have you here.
So thank you for that incredibly generous introduction.
You know, Dan, your name comes up so often in our classes, presentations that students give about your work. Of course, when I present your work, they read your books. I'm sure many, if not the majority here, is very much looking forward to reading your new book, and more importantly, cooking based on your new book, because all your books are very relevant and applicable. So I have a few questions that I want to start with, and then we'll open it up to others. Starting from the top, what are the Blue Zones for those who haven't heard of the Blue Zones, and what do their diet and eating habits consist of?
My specialty at National Geographic is finding extraordinary populations and then understanding the wisdom that we can put to work. And my first body of work revolved around reverse engineering longevity by identifying these 5 areas where people are living statistically longest. And this is kind of based on something called the Danish twin studies that established only about 20% of how long we live is dictated by our genes. The other 20% is something else. So by finding places where people got the outcomes we want and then looking for the correlations, we might have an insight into actually adding more years ourselves. And the value proposition is about 10 to 12 extra years for the average American. So the first Blue Zone we found was in Sardinia, Italy, where you have the highest concentration of male centenarians. And then in Okinawa, Japan, you have the most female centenarians. About 30 times more women reach age 100 than they do in the United States, the cohort of people over 60. In Korea, Greece, almost no dementia there, 8 extra years of life expectancy. And then in Costa Rica, the Nicoya Peninsula, you have a place with the lowest rate of middle-aged mortality. And my job was to parse out what are the things driving this longevity.
Dan, you know, you talk about in your book, and this is a sentence I repeat over and over again. You talk about adding more years to your life, and you said 12. We're not talking extra days or month, 12 years. That's more than a decade. But you also say you don't just add years to your life, you also add life to your years.
Yeah, so I also wrote books and a cover story for National Geographic on happiness to find the areas around the world where people report the highest life satisfaction and positive affect. And it turns out that these Blue Zones are all in the top 10% of the happiest places in the world. So the beauty here, pursuing longevity the Blue Zones way, doesn't involve taking rapamycin or metformin or these longevity hacks, stem cells, etc. The way people achieve longevity in Blue Zones, they live close to nature. They grow their own food. They sit down to dinner with their family. They have a spiritual life. They walk places. They take time to interact with their neighbors. They live in extended family. And the body of research that underpins every one of these when it tracks to longevity is very strong, but it's overlooked because marketers can't make money off of you on it. So I tried to paint a portrait of these places, story-driven science, that shows that there's a way to an extra 10 or 12 years that also makes the journey enjoyable.
Yeah. Now, speaking of enjoyable, you also write that the most important ingredient in any longevity recipe is taste.
Correct.
So, how are the eating habits that you've seen in the blue zones? Like, whether it's using beans or you talk about grains, vegetables, of course, um, challenge what most people in the US and the world, I think about healthy eating and what it should look like.
So if you want to know what a centenarian ate to live to be 100, you have to know what she was eating as a little girl and middle age and newly retired and lately. You can't just ask what they ate this morning. So to get at that, we aggregated dietary survey done in all 5 blue zones over the past 100 years, 155 of them. And I did it under the aegis of Harvard, actually, Walter Willett, who you may know, another department in your school. And when you average it all out, people living to 100 are eating about 90% whole plant-based food. The 5 pillars of every longevity diet in the world are whole grains, greens and garden vegetables, tubers like sweet potatoes, nuts, and beans. Beans are the pillar. If you're eating a cup of beans a day, it's associated with about 4 extra years of life expectancy. So the diets of longevity are really peasant foods. And my last book, The Blue Zone Kitchen, which was a #1 New York Times bestseller, simply took these peasant foods and gathered the best recipes to make them taste delicious. Why is delicious the most important ingredient? Because when it comes to longevity, and I would argue when it comes to happiness, if you're not doing it most days for most of your life, it's not worth the pursuit. And I could tell you that fermented soy or broccoli sprouts are the best, healthiest food in the world. But if you don't like them, you're not going to eat them for the long run. So making sure this food tastes delicious, that will get you eating it more than anything else, more than guilting you about the environment, more than animal cruelty, more than this will be healthy for you in 30 years. What's in front of you at lunch is the most determined if you're going to eat it for a long time.
Yeah, it's interesting. We talk also a lot about, and you talk about in the blue zones about the importance of physical exercise. And there's actually research showing that exercise like dancing is extremely good for you. Swimming is great for you. Walking is very good. But it's very clear in that research that the best exercise for you is your favorite form of exercise
Yes.
because you're more likely to do it. So I think it's the same with food. You're saying, the taste has to be there. It has to be delicious. Otherwise, most people are unlikely to persist.
One of the counterintuitive findings from the blue zones was that people there did not exercise, at least in the way we think of exercise as going to the gym or pumping iron or running a marathon. Their exercise or physical activity was natural. Every time they went to work or out to eat or to a friend's house at occasions to walk, their houses weren't full of mechanical conveniences that did their work. They had a garden out back. So they got the equivalent of about 12,000 steps a day without thinking about it. And that's what works in the long run. And we in America are constantly marketed the idea that we're going to get healthy if we're going to join a gym or pump iron. But the reality is 75% of Americans don't even get 20 minutes of physical activity. So we need to take a different approach. And I would argue it's shaping our environment rather than guilting or hounding or incenting individuals to go to the gym
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, and by creating a different environment, you mean more opportunities for walking, more inconveniencing ourselves, as you talk about in the book. So it's li even little things. Instead of getting, having a remote, get up to the TV and change the channel. Go shopping. Carry those shopping bags.
I suggest
But
actually
yeah.
a different operating system. So rather than trying to change our behavior, which fails for almost all people all the time in the long run, it's reshaping our environments. So setting up nudges and defaults. So we are unconsciously moving more. We're unconsciously eating slightly better food. We're unconsciously socializing more every day for decades. That's what's worked, and that's how our city projects are built.
So can you give concrete examples of what that would actually look like to get people to move more, to get people to eat more healthfully, to interact more with others?
Yes. So in your home, for example, most of us are on what I call a seafood diet. We eat the food we see. So every time you walk through your kitchen and you see a bag of chips on your counter or a toaster, that prompts us to eat something that's not all that healthy for us. On the other hand, if you have a fruit bowl in the most prominent part of your kitchen and you keep that full, every time you walk through the kitchen, you're more likely to eat something healthy. For cities, for example, you take a city like New York, Boulder, Colorado, Santa Barbara. And by the way, Boulder and Santa Barbara are among the happiest cities in America. When you look at the Gallup World Poll data, those are very walkable cities, and people are taking up between 9 and 11,000 steps a day without thinking about it. You compare those to places like Houston or Phoenix, which are essentially suburban-based cities where people have to drive. People there get about 3 or 4,000 steps a day. So the physical activity level is about double in these properly designed. And by the way, when you're a walkable city, you're bumping into people more often and you're socializing. And we all know that a foundation of happiness is social connection, and it doesn't have to be a meaningful conversation every time. It could be talking to your mailman or your barista or some random stranger. So I'm all about stacking the deck in favor of mindless physical activity and unintentional social interactivity. And actually, the only way we get paid in these cities is when we measurably increase life satisfaction and lower BMI. So I can tell you from 15 years of doing this actually works. We're all about 40% of our happiness or lack thereof is determined by our genes, thereabout. And I would argue the rest is a matter of stacking the deck in favor of happiness. So we know that happy people are also healthier and vice versa. Happiness and health, you can't really pull them apart. In a city that we help get healthier, we're naturally going to help them be happier. The more like social interaction, when you get rid of cars, for example, have you ever stood in a street where cars are whipping by at 50 miles an hour? Close your eyes and listen and smell and feel. You're going to feel stress. You're going to hear this this grating roar of motors going by. You're going to smell exhaust. Now imagine for a second a city where there's wide sidewalks and there's trees and cars are passing by at 30 miles an hour and people are interacting on that street, bumping into each other, outdoor cafes. And you think about how you feel unconsciously if you just closed your eyes. Now, whether you live in a city like Houston or a city like Santa Barbara, that is wholly up to the city. Cities do not have to live in these car-centric environments. They can plan for human beings and plan their streets for humans. And we find out that over the course of about 5 years, we can usually raise the physical activity level by about 20%, as measured by Gallup. And we see a commensurate jump in not only life satisfaction, but thriving. And they seem to go hand in hand.
Yeah. Have you done any work or looked at any cities outside of the US?
Yeah, so I wrote a cover story for National Geographic in 2019. I have a book called The Blue Zones of Happiness, where I worked with the World Poll and the Latino Barometer and the Eurobarometer. And we found the statistically happiest places in each of 3 continents. And we didn't use happiness as the guiding metric. We used life satisfaction, positive affect, and then sort of purpose. And the area in the world with the highest positive affect and lack of negative affect was Singapore, oddly enough. No, I'm sorry. That was life satisfaction. That was the best example of high life satisfaction. Costa Rica, specifically a city called Cartago, had the highest positive affect. And they produced the most happiness per GDP dollar in the world. And then at the time, Denmark was showing not only very high positive affect and life satisfaction, but also high purpose as measured by how often they got to use their strengths to do what they do best. And then I went to each of these places to try to understand the correlates, or what are the factors that seem to be explaining these different facets of happiness in 3 parts of the world. And by the way, in none of them are they taking positive psychology precepts and trying to remember to savor or to feel gratitude every day. They do it, but it's more of an endemic, more of a systematic explanation than it is a conscious decision or behavior modification decision.
Which means that the question becomes, how do you create conditions in place to elicit these behaviors, these mindsets, these ways of being? How do you create the systemic conditions in place?
Well, again, you sort of reverse engineer. We know that the biggest drivers of happiness on an international and a population level are trust, equality, health-adjusted life expectancy is really important. GDP is important, but GDP kind of thins out after the GDP of Portugal. But we sort of get it wrong. Our policymakers are aiming at the wrong target when they're trying to make our one country great again, or they're trying to just maximize the stock market or GDP. Those are actually sort of weak instruments in producing happiness. And indeed, if you're following Thomas Jefferson's precept that we ought to, the charge of every leader is the maximization of happiness and health of the population, we would take a more clear-eyed view of what the research tells us very clearly, the targets we ought to be aiming at. And in every one of these happiness blue zones, as it were, what you have are enlightened leaders who understand the policies that favor human well-being or health, or in all cases, by the way, it's universal health care, and it's making sure that the rights of all people are paid attention to, and not just the rights of a few. I know this sounds like a political agenda. It's not. It is, I'm right down the middle when it comes to policy. I mean, when it comes to my political beliefs, but it's so clear in the research that trust, equality, enough money to get by, social connectedness, these are the things we ought to be aiming at if we really want to produce greater happiness at the population level.
So I have so many questions. I don't even know where to begin, but I'll focus on this. The world is changing now. There's AI coming along. Technology is changing things, has changed things. John Haidt's work on the anxious generation. If you were a political leader and you could actually implement changes, whether it's on the city level you've already been doing, but the national level, what is the kind of policy that you would introduce to increase health and happiness?
This is going to sound very counterintuitive, but to make America healthier, the first thing I do is change the agriculture bill. Why? Because since Earl Butz in the 1970s, we've had an agricultural system that heavily favors wheat, corn, soybeans, and sugar beets. So these four foods, by the way, in the 70s, there weren't enough calories to go around. So we did have a real hunger issue. But now we've approximately tripled the output of these four grains or these four products. And when you think about these are all the products of ultra processed foods. Think of high fructose corn syrup. Think of crappy Wonder Bread. Think of feedlot or feed for feedlot animals, which, by the way, 95% of the meat we eat is feedlot, factory farm meat. Or sugar. We eat about 120 pounds of sugar a day. Why do we eat so much of that? Because these inputs are so cheap. And these food companies, they make a lot of money by just making them taste hyper palatable, getting the sharpest minds in Madison Avenue to market them to us. And they're ubiquitous. And by the way, food companies aren't bad. They're doing what they're supposed to do, just like every company is maximize profit. But if these companies had to pay the real cost of corn, soybeans, sugar beets, and wheat, the prices of junk food would soar and the consumption would drop and we would all be healthier. We lose about 670,000 Americans every single year to the standard American diet. And that's largely because of the way we eat. Now, we don't have to eat that way. In people in places in the blue zones, they're eating, like I said, mostly a whole food plant-based diet. And these are cheap foods. These aren't expensive foods.
Yeah.
So if the agricultural bill shifted their focus to the inputs for junk food and subsidize the foods we know drive longevity, we'd have a healthier America. That's the number one thing to do.
Wow. Yeah, that would have impact.
Number two, trust. Arguably the biggest. Can I trust my politicians? Can I trust the police? Can I trust my neighbors? There's lots of small things we can do. We could actually shift more money to police, not more police with bigger guns, but training those police and recruiting a higher quality or higher trained individual or higher educated individuals, because the presence of police do indeed inspire trust. Better lighting, fixing broken glass, cleaning up graffiti. These are all low-hanging fruit to produce more trust. A bigger investment in neighborhoods, by the way. You hear a lot about social determinants of health. I'm a big fan of the civic determinants of health. So helping fund and encourage neighbors getting to know each other, creating these sort of neighborhood associations where they're getting together periodically, they're focusing on safety, they're keeping an eye on the streets, eye on children. These are basic, block and tackle strategies, but we don't pay attention to them because they're not sexy and they're not profitable. But when you look at areas where the level of life satisfaction and positive affect and low negative affect are in place, you see all of these facets and characteristics in place, and we ought to be mimicking them.
Yeah. So we talked about, the macro, if you were a politician. I'm very interested to know, what does your life look like? What are your rituals, your habits? What do you do every day?
I more or less sit on the couch and eat Doritos, watch reruns of Leave It to Beaver, and then I call it a day. uh,
That's
no,
happiness. Yeah.
well, to your point, I do something physical every day that I like. So I
Mm.
live in Miami. I go if the ocean's nice, I go swimming. If a friend calls me up to go biking, I go biking. If I'm feeling tight, I go do yoga in a kind of a sexy yoga place. I have a gym that's really social. I do that. I eat a mostly whole food, plant-based diet. Makes me feel better. Um, I eat a little bit of fish, but not much fish. I know that I am happiest. And by the way, I've seen the research that people who interact with other people 6 hours a day, they were also are more likely to report the highest levels of happiness. So that's about as much time as I spend a day. I really make a lot of effort to build a really solid group of friends and even acquaintances, and spend about 6 hours a day interacting. I
Wow.
have taken the time to know exactly what my life purpose is, what I'm good at, what I like to do, where I can make a contribution in the world. I've written it down, and that is the ballast for me when time gets hard, and it makes individual decisions very easy. Talking to Tal, that's going to make an impact. I get to talk what I like. I get to meet a guy I admire. Bam, 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 right down the strike zone of my purpose, and it's easy to say yes to that. And then also, I'm a big believer in giving back, and I try to spend some time every week giving back in a way that's meaningful to me. I give money, but mostly I get most of the satisfaction, even though it requires the most of the energy when I take the time. I recently spent 10 weeks showing 20 inner city moms how to cook whole food, plant-based in a one pot meal. So basically, people who have about the cooking skill level as you do, Tal, and to get one pot, show them maniacally delicious recipes with all the ingredients being inspired by blue zones, and showing them that within about 20 minutes, I can produce 8 or 10 servings that cost about $3 a servings, and they'll
Wow.
get better than a McDonald's hamburger or chicken nuggets.
Yeah.
That I believe, if we want to get America healthier, we got to get them cooking at home again. Why? Because every time you go out, you consume about 300 more calories than you would if you ate at home. 300, and those calories tend to be laden with sodium and sugar and ultra processed food. Also, you're not sitting around a family table when you're going out and having meaningful conversations. You're not enjoying the meditative, and I would argue enjoyable process of cooking, and you're not controlling your calories.
Yeah.
So the Blue Zone Kitchen, it sounds like a facile cookbook, but I actually worked with a Stanford AI lab. We scraped 650,000 recipes from the internet, analyzed the most popular recipes, and we found 7 different, well, I gotta get 7 here, 7 different flavor combinations that Americans love. So to make sure, the number one ingredient, deliciousness, is the major driver of this book. All the recipes are built on. It's almost like we cheated, Tal. It's almost like we went to the key of the test and read that, and then
Right.
went back and did the project. So we knew what the outcome we wanted. Maniacally delicious. Built all 100 recipes, and that's the book, The Blue Zone Kitchen One Pot Meals. And
Yeah. And again, I'm assuming they're relatively easy to make, so that people like me
Well, the
can
proof will be in the
invent.
pudding, Tal. When you cook one of them successfully and report back to your class here, I will be vindicated.
Well, yes, I'm glad you put me on the spot,
I'm
and
going to send you an
I commit.
Instapot. And all you got to do is cut some things up, throw it in there, put a little herb and spice, put the top on and push a button and come back after class and you'll have dinner. Delicious dinner for your family.
That I think I may manage. Um, so we're going to open it up for questions now, Dan. One last thing, you use the word mostly plant-based. Also, when you talk about the blue zones, what else is there? Or is that different for different blue zones?
Well, so the average. So they are eating meat about 5 times per month. Over the course of a year, it's about 22 kilograms on average. I'm sorry, 11 kilograms, 22 pounds of meat a year.
A
We in
year.
America eat 240 pounds per person per year. That is a bathtub full of dead animal. And I guarantee you, if you're eating that as much as an average American, you're about tripling your chances of type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and cancers of the GI tract, including breast and colon. So, so they're eating some meat. They're eating fish about twice per week, but it tends to be sort of the mid-chain fish, like your sardines or your mackerel or your anchovies, not the heavy metal aggregators like swordfish and tuna fish. They eat about 3 eggs per week on average. And
Mm.
those eggs are almost always from the free-range chickens that run around in their yard, not the factory produced eggs you get at the gas station. And when it comes to what they're drinking, about 6 glasses of water, teas of all sorts. Teas are a
Mm.
longevity beverage. We've all heard about green tea. It's true. Coffee, good news for most of us, especially Venki there. I see he's taking a drink of coffee as we speak. So coffee is one of the great pleasures that we can enjoy with impunity, high in antioxidants and correlated with lower rates of type 2 diabetes and Parkinson's, believe it or not. But here's the disruptive thing that a lot of people will like. People in blue zones are drinking about 3 glasses of wine a day. And we know this from surveys that people making it to 90 in the Mediterranean blue zones, almost 90% are drinking wine every single day. Not rum and coke, not cosmopolitans, but they're organic wine. So, it does sort of challenge this blanket, any amount of alcohol is bad for you. I actually don't believe that.
Mm. Fascinating. Wow. All right. So I have to let you go, and I'll put you in the hands of Luciana. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Tal. Hi, Dan. Um, First of all, thank you very much for coming and visiting us. I think we all feel very lucky to have you, and I'll be very short with my question. Um, I'm currently recovering from a car accident, and I have looked into the recovery knowledge in blue zones. And I picked up very good things. So I'm now drafting a manual for people who recover even from a cold or from a car accident, from drugs, from homelessness. Because I think I live in California, but I had been 20 years in Spain, and I recently came back. And I think there's a lot for newcomers that we don't know that the Blue Zones has helped me. If the first part of the question is about that, what would you say? Who should we be reading? Who should we be following? People who are just in a recovery state, not just health, but like I said, even the homelessness. No. The second part is I'm a project manager of a project in Baja California that is Blue Zone inspired and happiness science inspired, and it's going to be a community driven project that's going to have a multi-generational residency, for people with low income. It's very inclusive, and for people who I'm not just low income. What model who should I be reading if I'm managing that project? So those are my two questions.
All right, to your first question. First of all, I think you have your own Blue Zone project in the making with recovery. And, if I were taking that on, I don't know if Blue Zones offer much insight on recovery, but if I were going to do a Blue Zones of recovery, the first place I'd start is a review of all the available literature. I bet you could just put into ChatGPT and look for all of the best practices at population level of what interventions work at helping people recover more quickly, whether it's from an accident or some other trauma. And I don't know that body of literature, but that's where I would start. I'd also want to know, is there a place around the world? We tend to think if it's not developed in the United States, it can't be that great. But actually, there's lots of other places in the world that do things better than we. And I would ask myself, well, where has there been great disasters? And how have they dealt with recovery on a mass scale? And I'll bet you there's great lessons to be learned from that.
Mm.
As far as your project in Baja California, Mexico, right?
Yes.
I wrote a book called The Blue Zone Solution and another book called The Blue Zones of Happiness. I would check one of those out of the library, especially Blue Zones of Happiness, because I think I marshal in the available evidence on what you can do at a population level to stack the deck in favor of health and happiness when it comes to policy. But the most cost-effective intervention are the ones you can convince city council or the mayor. If you can, there's this bizarre correlation between the quality of water and life satisfaction. And you can't draw a causal relationship, but it may be that improving water quality. Of course, I would argue, and Mexico, unfortunately, is following the United States when it comes to transportation. I would get back to their roots in looking to rebuild their streets the way Grandma and Grandpa did for human beings. So you might start there.
Mm.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Liliana.
Ah,
Hi,
hello.
Liliana.
Hello, Dan. Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you.
I don't know. Let me see why I have here.
We can hear you well, Liliana.
We can
Yes.
hear you.
Okay. I don't know if mine is a question or a petition or both of them together. The first thing that I would like to ask you is to meet you in person and to have
I'm
maybe
better in print.
an hour or two. Huh? I'll fly to Miami, and I tell you why. I just finished going to the 5 blue zones and with another colleague, and we did live 1 month in each of them. Yes.
Oh my God, you're kidding me.
Yes. So, and we have the pleasure to meet everybody. The researchers, Yanni Pez, Dr. Makoto Suzuki, Rhonda Spencer. We've been with all of them. Also, we've been with people from the community, and specifically me, I've been for the last 5 years going to the Blue Zone in Nicoya in Costa Rica. So I have a bunch of things that I would like to talk with you, discuss. Maybe you are missing in that group. I would love to go to Miami and meet you or whatever you tell me. That's the petition and question. And the other thing is, we also went to the Blue Zones project, the Beach Cities project, and I've seen the store of Blue Zones in Costa Rica too. And I want to ask you if you have any plan, because this Blue Zone project has worked very well in the United States. If you have any plan what I call a giving back, like giving back to the 5 blue zones. Like what I experience is some of them, a lot of poverty, the elder people need support, the elder houses, the hospitals. So if you happen to have a plan to do something there or not, that's something that I would like to like get involved or maybe give ideas or something that my experience in the 5 blue zones, together with all the research that you have done, maybe will come out something interesting. I have to say that I did eat a lot of meat in some of them and also dance a lot.
Yes. So of course the diet's changing.
Yes.
In the last 5 years, or 15 years rather. And you know, most of the diet that I report is a function of what they've eaten over the past 100 years, but giving back, yes, in Costa Rica, I'm a big funder of an organization that supports the centenarians. You know, Sardinia and Icaria, they're both first world countries. Japan is a first world country. Loma Linda, California, first world. I don't perceive the great need there. And I'm also, although there is some poverty, I am wary of over affluence. I almost think that a lot of the sickness in America are diseases of affluence. So you want to be very careful about this sort of funding, and perhaps it might be an imaginary need, and indeed it might be the absence of too much money that they don't have as many electronics, or they can't afford to get on social media, or they have to cooperate. Or
Yes,
the healthiest foods, I believe, are the cheapest foods. They're not the superfoods and meaty foods and that we see on the internet. So yeah, I'm conflict on that. It's a good question though.
Yeah, you know, Dan, and Liliana, one of the things that we often see, and it even came out in our brief conversation, are the parallels between health and happiness. And you know, you were saying that perhaps affluence could be a cause of some of the ailments, the physical ailments that we're talking about. And you know, for example, I can afford a lot of meat. Well, that may not be great that you can afford a lot of meat. And it reminds me, on the psychological side, of research by Sunia Luthar. And she's a professor originally from India, now teaching at Columbia University, where she talks about the underprivilege of privilege.
Love that.
And how so many of the psychological elements that we're seeing are a result of or can be traced back to affluence. And again, of course, it's a very difficult topic to talk about. There's also a very, you know, thin line between, you know, poverty that we know hurts and affluence that can also hurt. So anyway, very interesting question to think about.
I just want to point out, I didn't mean money. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Not money, not necessarily. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
By the way, connecting, the best way to connect with me, if you have other questions, or, you know, the best way to communicate for me is at Dan Buettner on Instagram. Just
Great.
at my name, at Dan Buettner, and I answer all my direct messages, and happy to continue the conversation.
Super duper. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. Philip, hello.
Hello, good evening. I'm Philip. I'm a student of Tal, and
you're also a very good gardener. I'm really impressed with that garden
well,
back.
I did it just for you. Well, it's summer in Vienna. I'm in Vienna. Actually, the sun is already down. Anyway, I'm a student of Tal, and Tal taught us about your blue zones. And my question is, how would you recommend to apply your findings to our real life?
So, okay, my central thesis is don't try to change your behavior, shape your environment. And I would argue one of the biggest is our social environment. In the group of people that are closest to us are in Okinawa, it's called a moai. So it's a circle of friends. And I advocate paying a lot of attention to that. The 5 friends who we spend the most time with and we're closest to. And while I would never tell you to dump your old unhealthy friends and unhappy friends, they probably need you. I will say, and we know this from Nicholas Christakis's work, that if your 3 best friends are obese and unhealthy, there's a 150% better chance that you'll be overweight. Drug use and alcohol abuse are all measurably contagious. Unhappiness and even loneliness are all contagious. So I go as far as to writing down the people closest in your life and actually, ranking them for, are these friends whose idea of recreation is something active, playing pickleball or golf or gardening or walking? Are these friends who care about you on a bad day? Are they friends who push you intellectually? And that encourage your successes? Are they? And by the way, it's not a bad idea to have a vegan or vegetarian in your immediate social network because they're going to show you how to eat healthy plant-based food. And again, I'm a big believer in what's going to last a long time. I have almost no faith in diets and exercise programs and supplement regimens, et cetera. But friends are long-term adventures. So shaping that social environment, I think, is your best first step towards kind of a blue zone-esque life.
Thank you. So look for the friends that are like you would like to be.
That's it. Summed it up better than I should have just said that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Philip. Dan, one of the ideas that that we talk about a lot is the importance, of course, of environment. And I go back to the research from the 1960s by some of the leading psychologists at the time, one of them being Walter Mischel, who realized that 90% of our behavior is determined by our external environment. It's only 10% that's about, character and discipline.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, so that was in the 1960s. And then, of course, came all the research by Stanley Milgram on obedience to authority and Zimbardo, the prison experiment that shows just how much negative impact the environment can have. Now, just like it can have negative impact, it can also have positive impact. So, there can be obedience to authority, but there can also be a healthy lifestyle based on the fact that others are eating healthfully. And this is where the focus has to be. This is where you get the most leverage. Create a healthy environment. And it's, your work, the work of Dan Ariely, and basically most of social psychology points to that. And yet still people overly rely on, okay, I'm going to be disciplined and I'm just going to eat, what the blue zoners eat. Or I'm, going to exercise like, I'm going to start a triathlon. Yes, you're going to do it if others around you are going to do it. If you're in that right environment, as Christakis and Fowler talk about.
My theory is, the diet industry is about 150 billion. The exercise industry is another 200 billion. The anti-aging industry is another 83 billion. That's what you constantly market it to us. There's very little money into shaping your living room so you move more, or shaping your social network. That's why I believe we don't really hear about it. It's not sexy. It's not the Peter Attia, Huberman, sexy, take this pill or inject yourself with the stem cell and you'll be magically better. So we have to rely on the Tals and the new generation of happiness experts on this call to bring forward the research that really helps human beings.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, one of them is Venki. Hello, Venki.
Hi, Tal, and hi, Dan.
Hi, Venki.
Hi. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's a real honor for me to be here and ask you this question. We are blessed that we are students of Tal, and I can tell you, I have become a better person. My daughter is a good, she validated that. She said, Dad has experienced a lot of growth, and she's 26, by the way. So she's an adult who said that. So I take that as a compliment. That's thanks to Tal, a large part, and he would say that. So I picked up a couple things from you. It's all about deliciousness, whether it is deliciousness of food, deliciousness of exercise, deliciousness of friends. So there is a theme of deliciousness, which I
love
picked
that.
so thank you for that. And I also picked up the stack the deck, stack the deck. You kept saying that. You repeated that several times. And that ties into what Tal has taught us about MVI, which is kind of, just layered step by step, small steps done consistently yields big results. So it ties in very, very, very much into that. And then I thank you for giving me hope that I will be a cook too, because my anytime I enter the kitchen, they used to run away when they were at home. And, so I'm going to buy that crock pot and buy the book and follow your recipe. My question is a very simple one. What is you mentioned coffee? Yes, it is coffee, but it is ginger coffee. And hailing from India, we use a lot of spices and herbs. So what are the roles of spices in longevity?
Oh, it's a very good question. I think one of the most convincing spices when it comes to longevity is turmeric, or turmeric, depending on how you. It's been proven to lower inflammation, especially when consumed with black pepper, and some suggestion that it helps fight cancer. Hot peppers ramp up the metabolism, good antioxidants there. In Ikaria, this island, about 10,000 people, we thoroughly interviewed everybody over the age of 65 and found no dementia. We use the same tool the NIA uses. And coincidentally, they drink these herbal teas every day of their life. An oregano, a rosemary, a thyme, and a sage, and a mint. And we had all of these herbs tested, and they were all anti-inflammatory, antioxidants. Some were diuretic, which means they lower your blood pressure. So herbs are a really powerful, under-celebrated, I think, longevity ingredient. The other thing that I think will be familiar to people from India is greens, many of which grow wild and are completely ignored. Dandelions, for example. Dandelions are powerful diuretics. And, we squirt Roundup and other toxics on them, and fennel greens, which we throw away. And there's in Ikaria, there were about 70 different greens that most of us would weed whack from our backyard. And they're adding them in salads and putting lemon and olive oil on there, or baking them into beautiful pies. And we miss a great food source that I would say our grandmothers seize upon.
Mm. Yeah, and of course, when it comes to the spices, and the reason, Venki, why I like your question so much is that, yeah, it adds years to your life and life to your years, because they're delicious, of course.
Good point.
Thank you. Thank you. Rebecca.
Hello. Thank you for keeping on after noon, my time. Dan, it's an honor to be in your presence, and Tal, thank you for this really insightful and actionable series. I am a food grower by marriage. I married the son of a farmer in the Netherlands, and I watched the Netflix documentary, The Blue Zones, with my 80-year-old mother-in-law who grew up on the farm in the Netherlands, and like we were just nodding violently to everything that was said, particularly the gardening part. So my question is around community gardening. I just put my Instagram into the chat, so if you're interested, it's called Harvesting Delight. I just started it, and I'm seeing this incredible movement in my community in Seattle where we are sharing food. I kid you not, this showed up on my doorstep today. And I'm sharing some a little show and tell, and I have some thyme. You just mentioned thyme. I don't know if my screen will show you. Anyways, I'm drying my herbs now and giving them away into my community. And I feel like you really hit on something that I want to plug into, which is it's not taxed, it's not marketed to us, it's something we're just doing. And I'm interested to know if you see an opportunity for people like me who want to just sort of grow food and share it and be like self-sufficient and a good steward of the land. And how do we do that and kind of spread the word? Because the powers that be want us to go to Safeway, right? They want us to pay for food. And so I'm really interested in community gardening, kind of not just by need, because we do live in a nice part of Seattle, but because it is so delightful and it pays dividends in terms of our community and our social and physical health.
Well, one of the tools we used in the blue zones, in our blue zone city, we influence policy. We certify restaurants, grocery stores, workplaces, schools, and churches. But then the third pillar is we get individuals to take a blue zone pledge. And one of the things we ask them to do is to either grow a garden in their backyard, or we source all the community gardens and partner with them and send them people who come and rent plots. So we facilitate it. I don't know how you do it as an individual other than set a great example and share your produce as you're doing with your neighbors in the hopes that it'll become infectious. But it is absolutely a powerful tool for not only well-being at the community level, but also health and longevity. And it gets back, I think, to this word I like. I've been using lately, the civic determinants of health, where you create the connectivity between individuals that start creating the movement.
Yeah. Again, the powerful connection between health and happiness, in that when you are producing your own food and sharing it, what you're doing, you're eating more healthfully, you're also strengthening the social bonds and hence increasing happiness.
And I would argue even like, maybe Ratatouille being one of my favorite movies, like anyone can cook. Yes, even you, Tal. If you saute some of the zucchini with a little garlic and salt and olive oil, it really,
I think
it's
we
amazing.
need to do a potluck. I think all
Yes.
240 or 400 of us would come over to Tal's house. We'll all bring an ingredient and have a huge potluck. I'll bring the wine. You bring the time. And
if you like dill, I'll bring a lot of herbs for you. Yeah, you got it. But no, I appreciate what you're saying. And also the harvesting and the cooking and the community, like it's all delightful, really. And I'm sort of,
really
so
Exactly.
Blue Zone Pledge. Yeah, thank you for your insight.
Thank you. Vale, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So hi Dan, how are you? We met last year in Puebla.
I remember. Good to see you again.
You remember me? Yeah, good to see you
Your
too.
your hair was a different color.
It was blonde there. I have a question, like a little walking away from the food and dieting, but I'm really curious about how the narratives in these blue zones were, like how, because we were talking that some or most of them are first world countries and big economies. Costa Rica is not, but you were talking about life satisfaction. So I'm curious about how their stories and their narratives impact this life satisfaction, or what's like your intake on this part.
Well, I don't know if I'm answering your question exactly, but and whether it's happiness information, statistics, and facts, or it's health information, statistics, and facts, if you just spew those at people or appeal to their brain, it doesn't stick as well as if you can go through their heart and then up to their brain. So we at National Geographic, we try to tell stories. And my way of reporting this, I'm a science writer to a certain extent. I create the story, but it's all first based on the statistical underpinnings. Where's the statistically longest lived areas? And we go through a lot of work to confirm that. Where are the statistically happiest places? So we identify the places that have achieved the outcomes that we want. That's step one. Step two is I look for all the correlates. I like to call it the ingredients to the cake recipe, whether it's to longevity or whether it's to happiness. And once I have a pretty good idea on what are the inputs to that longevity or happiness, then I go to these places and I kiss enough frogs before I find the princes and the princesses. In the case of longevity, they are the centenarians. In the case of happiness, it's the people who meet the profile of the statistically happiest person. But they have to have a good story, and use their good story as the Trojan horse to package up the information and send it into their heart. And then knowing that will stick and make it to their brain. That the Netflix documentary, it's actually called Live to 100. So I hired the best directors and the best producers. And I said, I want stories, story-driven science, and also great cinematography. And that took us 3 years, but it won 3 Emmy Awards. And it was the most watched show on Netflix for when it first came out, and a top 10 in about 180 countries. Not because the factoids that we came up with, but because we found really good characters. And those characters had great stories of romance, of hardships, of getting over trauma by using the insights of Blue Zones. And that's what makes it stick. And it takes a little bit more work, but I think that any community-based health or happiness organization that's interested in getting people to pay attention, you want to find the good stories that deliver your message.
Yeah. Dan, we talk about stories, and I'm very glad Vale asked this question and the way you answered it. We talk about stories as the unifying theory of psychology. So, in physics, they haven't found the unifying theory of everything. But in psychology, they have, and it's stories. Why? Because everywhere you look in psychology, you find stories. So you look at cognitive psychology. What do we remember best? Not statistics, we remember stories. If you look at developmental psychology, how do children learn best? They learn through stories. If you look at psychotherapy, how do we heal? We go into a session and we tell our story and we feel better as a result.
Very insightful.
You look at the greatest leaders. They are first and foremost storytellers. So this is organizational psychology. Every field of psychology, you have stories at the center of it. And that's how you bring about change. We're talking here about, the happiness revolution. You're talking about the health revolution. How do you create that? Yes, of course, science, evidence-based, first and foremost. And the carrier of that, stories.
That's such a good insight. It's very Joseph Campbell too, isn't it?
Very much so, yes. And they are heroic stories. Watching the Netflix series, you admire those storytellers.
That's such a great insight. I had no view. It makes perfect sense. Developmental and psychotherapy is getting you to change the story of yourself. That
The
it's
narrative.
not be
Exactly.
terrible, and I'm not singled out for bad luck and that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you,
Thank
Vale.
you. It was
Thank
great
you.
to see you. Thank you, Tal.
Thank you.
I'm
Mario,
drinking Tal Kool-Aid over here. I'm going to join you guys as a student.
please, as long as you bring something to the potluck, you're welcome.
Hello, Daniel. Hello, Tal.
Hey,
It's such a pleasure to be here with you both today. Tal, thank you for starting the happiness revolution and for bringing Dan to our class. Dan, I was listening to you today, and it's such an honor also to have you here. And I play with your name. I want to give you a gift, a present, and I will ask you something. With the name, as Benki said, Daniel, or your name is deliciousness, is also architect of narrative, also network, because you were talking about environment. Also, Daniel is intelligent. The I is for intelligent. Also, the E is for emotional, also environment. And the L is for longevity, and
I
also
love this.
leadership. So this is your name. That's from this hour that we have shared together. And
Thank you so much, Mario.
oh, you are welcome. My pleasure. And that's a game for me. It's like playing. And I was so inspired by you that as an architect, I analyzed, the aerial pictures of the blue zone, the 5 blue zone, trying to find an urban pattern. But I didn't find any pattern in the, urbanly. And I wanted to ask you about that. I found what you already said today about the invisible things that beyond the people can walk to the most of their daily activities, and also even in steep places, and they breathe clean air and grow food and exercise and stay connected with nature, the biophilia and all this. And from your experience, have you found any consistent physical or urban design features? And if you were an architect, what would you always include in your designs to foster well-being and longevity? Beyond, I'm organizing the first Congress about happiness and architecture that we will celebrate it next year in the Canary Islands in Spain. And if it resonates with you, you are more well than welcome. Tal is enthusiastic with this, and we are also trying to invite to Alain de Botton. We want to make a worldwide to follow the happiness revolution and to involve politicians and governments, and it's a huge aligned with the purpose, with my purpose and a lot of our purpose. And also, I will be next over in Damanhur in Italy. Do you know Damanhur in Italy? It is a federation of communities, of conscious communities, that starts a new one community of when they reach 200 people. And I also wanted to ask you if the Blue Zone unit size, what do you think the size of every unit of neighborhood, or so to recap, I want that because this is a lot of information about the urban pattern. If you have found any, urban pattern, like as an architect. Also, if you were an architect, what would you always include in your designs? And the size of the Blue Zone unit. And finally, one more personal. What is the greatest present or learning that you've brought into your own life from all your travels and research?
Well, it's a brain full here, but I'll do my best. First of all, when it comes to urban design, I think it's almost always a failure when you get a group of architects together and they plan a community and they create this sort of bird's eye model. They think what human beings want. But almost every city started out as a single building. Often it's a house, and then maybe the house opened up a tavern or a place for travelers to eat, and then a church came up, and then a pastor came along and built a house. And it's always sort of a main street, and then that main street gets full, and then people based on the sort of contour of the land. They'll build a row of houses behind it. They're very rarely laid out in a grid. It's laid out more sort of like a solar system. It expands out. All these blue zones have a town center. It'll often be a plaza, but it's a place where people naturally meet and congregate, naturally come to socialize at night. I think that's a good idea. Sidewalks are always, if this, most of the blue zones, the streets still are basically sidewalks with the occasional car. But in our modern world, you have to build a special walkway for humans. There's almost always trees and also social places. I think for me personally, one of the biggest gifts that the blue zones gave me were beans. I get most of my protein and fiber from beans. There's Wendy Sachs up there doing a cheer. I could tell she's one of my sisters right there. But whenever you take a bean and a grain, let's say beans and corn tortilla and make a taco or burrito, or you take beans and rice and put some delicious herbs and spices and sauces, or pasta and fagioli, you get all the amino acids necessary for human sustenance. So all the protein. 90% of Americans don't get enough fiber, and fiber is what keeps our gut healthy and produces the feel-good hormones, the endorphins and serotonin. That's all metabolized in our gut when it has enough fiber. Fiber also in our gut creates something called short-chain fatty acids, which modulate inflammation, a root of all age-related disease. We don't get enough of it. Beans are truly the secret to longevity because they can be grown sustainably. They're shelf stable. Poor people can afford them. They're great for their inner city. And when you take blue zones wisdom, I argue the great secret people in blue zones have is they know how to make beans taste delicious. We have no idea how to make beans. We ate the horrible, Boston baked beans or some boring old lentils that we put on a salad. Blue zone recipes are, the Mardi Gras of bean stews. I start every day. For when I'm at home, I have a minestrone, a bean soup that I learned from the longest lived family in the history of the world, the Melise family in Sardinia. They ate it every day of their life, and if it was good enough for them, it's good enough for me. And, if you want the recipe, you can come to my website, danbuettner.com. It's a free download. And make that for yourself as the first meal of the day. You'll be on your way to 100.
They had it every day.
The Melise family, yes.
Yeah, wow.
Why did they have it every day? Because they largely relied on their garden and pasta and beans. Beans, they could, especially in the winter months. That's what was available. They couldn't run down to the Costco and get food, or maybe once or twice a year they butcher a pig or some chickens, but they had to rely on these peasant foods that would make it through the winter. So
Amazing.
this soup and whatever was growing in their garden. Somebody mentioned ratatouille. Minestrone is kind of the ratatouille of Italy, and genius to that food.
Amazing. So we have time, unfortunately, for just one final short question. I'm sorry, Mark, Wendy, and Carol. But Lauren, please. You're muted. Lauren, you're muted.
Hi, thank you. So nice to get to meet with you, Dan, and thanks, Tal, for the opportunity. I do have a quick question. So I'm actually living outside of the US right now in Brazil, and I live in a compound essentially, but it's got about 4,000 residents, so it's a small town. And we have a lot of things here that I think line up a lot for a project. But do you have opportunities to be certified outside of the US?
Well, we're not really a certification organization. We're more of a solution. And I found, we did do a project in Iowa where we just basically gave the cities the playbook, and then asked them to do the work. And it's a little bit like giving a pre-med student all of the textbooks and then come back 4 years later and expect them to be a doctor. It just doesn't work. And we found through the School of Hard Knocks that the only way to really work is to bring trained team members in who know how to shape environments, whether it's policy, grocery stores, restaurants, schools, individuals. These are all trained, and we require our cities to make a 5-year commitment. None of this work happens quickly. And so we're not in the certification business. We're in the population improvement business. And it's hard. It's not possible. And certainly our techniques are all open source. There's nothing I do that's a great secret. But the general approach is not silver bullet, it's silver buckshot. And that's the approach. I also I see Carol Lim from Singapore on there, and I just want a quick shout out to Singapore. It's one of our new blue zones. I recognized it in our Living in 100 documentary. And now there's a country that gets it right. They have enlightened leadership who have, using evidence, have the informed policy, has really added 25 years to the life expectancy since the 1960s, has very high positive affect, very high life satisfaction, and the highest health adjusted life expectancy in the world. So Carol, next week, you're in charge of teaching the rest of us what they do right in Singapore.
Thanks so much, Dan. Thank you for the shout out. I appreciate it. Actually, I wanted to share about a program that I'm here involved in Singapore, and I was wondering whether I'll just do it very quickly, if it's okay.
Very quickly, please, because we are
Yes,
on time.
of course. Yes, I do know that we are running over time, but I thought that this would be a great opportunity to share with Dan, and I thought that he might be quite interested in a program like this as well. So I'm actually supporting the National University of Singapore here. And we are just about to start our first cohort of Asia's first life transition program for senior leaders. And by senior leaders, we mean these are leaders who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and they have kind of like achieved a certain level of corporate success, or they're planning early retirement, and they're thinking about what's next in their new chapter of life. And we really want them to come back to the university, think about their lives in the context of the 100-year life, right? What does retirement mean, and what does post-retirement mean, and what is the impact that they can continue to create for the community to live a joyful and significant life? I'm just wondering that for Dan, if you were to design a program like this, given that you don't have a full context of what our program is, I'm very curious, how would you design a program, given how leadership programs are usually designed? How would you design it differently to inspire senior leaders?
I know we're out of time. I'll give you 2 quick ideas. The first one is I would circle them up, and I would, based on values, interests, and schedules, I would break them up into groups of 5 and challenge them to do something together for 5 to 10 weeks so that they can connect and share their pure wisdom. The second thing I would have them do is sign up for Tal's class for the next round. And I think that'll get them 60% the way there.
That's very cool. Thank you.
And for that, Dan, I would like to invite you to be a member of our community and start the class. When it comes to the Blue Zones class, you're exempt from it. We'll give you a pass.
It'd be funny if I flunked that unit.
What if, just building on Lauren's question, what if I wanted to become an expert in being a change agent for the Blue Zones? How would one go about that? So if I want to be the person who goes to, my city or to other cities and spreading the wisdom, what would the process look like?
Well, I don't know any other answer than to, first of all, look at the way the evidence-based ways you can reshape the built environment, the political environment, the interiors of buildings so that people mindlessly or unconsciously move more, eat better, socialize more, and know and live their purpose. So again, it's it's adopting an operating system that focuses on shaping surroundings rather than the brute effort of.
And Dan, do you have a school that teaches people to do that? I mean, you have many books, and again, many people here on this call have read and will read your books. Do you have a process that you take people through where you basically educate change agents?
If you come to work for Blue Zones, you kind of learn it, but I don't have a school. Not that I wouldn't be interested in it. It's just that I run out of hours in the day.
Yeah, well, maybe we can talk about that. And I'm sure there are many people here who would love, A, to be part of it, and B, to help you create such a school. Because there's so much need for the work that you do. Thank you, Dan, for inspiring so many people around the world and adding years to life and life to years. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you. If you have any follow-up questions, I'm at Dan Buettner. Anybody can direct message me, and I'm happy to return your message. And Tal, let's stay in touch. Send me an email if you get a chance.
Will do.
All right.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. We'll see you when you're 100.
Gracias. Thank you. Gracias. Thank you.
Read that book by both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
much.
much. Muchas gracias.